Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video. Today we will be discussing the 2024 election and specifically the absolutely terrible polling done recently. So yeah, let's just get into it. So current polling is absolutely terrible. I mean, we're getting near 2016 levels with how absolutely awful this polling is done. Basically, pretty much outdated. It was done weeks ago, and they just released it to give Kamala a bump before the DNC. And also, they just oversample Democrats, and we'll see in the demographics of the polling that they are clearly oversampling and changing the polls so it has a heavy Democrat bias and passing it off as legitimate. And specifically, today we will be talking about the New York Times Siena poll, and this poll is like everything wrong with Democrat leaning polls, where it is just unbelievably god awful. So she is winning in this poll Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin by 4 points, 50% each, and Donald Trump at 46%. Again, we're already running into a problem where somehow they are voting the exact same. Like, there are no differences. Somehow Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are voting the exact same as Michigan, which it doesn't even make any sense. I mean, given the current track record of the race, Michigan not voting more liberal than Pennsylvania or Wisconsin doesn't make any sense at all. Wisconsin voting the same amount as Michigan is also nonsensical. I mean, if you wanted a more accurate poll, probably is Pennsylvania is going to be in between Michigan and Wisconsin, and Michigan is going to be the more liberal, and then Wisconsin is going to be more conservative. And depending on if they vote for Trump or Kamala, it just kind of varies in between there. But the likelihood that they vote by the exact same margin across every single state doesn't make any sense. And the fact that they are backing Kamala by 4 points in each state, Biden couldn't even get 3 points in Michigan. So how the hell is Kamala getting 4 points in, say, Wisconsin? That would mean a 3-point shift from 2020 to 2024 in Wisconsin after the 2022 midterms saw the Republicans win the popular vote in Wisconsin by around double digits, which, how does that make any sense? How does that make any sense that we somehow go from 2022, and these are the same people who talk about 2022 like, oh, that's the predictor for the 2024 election. That's going to be the predictor for Republicans losing by a massive majority, which they didn't even in 2022. But even if we go off of that logic, it still doesn't make any sense. Why would they go from Republicans plus around 10 to Kamala being up 4 points in a state that is demographically more Republican than Pennsylvania or Michigan and has shifted to the right quite a bit? So, explain to me how that happened. And that's probably the least worst part of the poll. That's their best part of the polling. That somewhat makes sense if you don't think about it at all, but the other stuff on here is absolutely laughable. I mean, we got the gender now. Men are going for Trump 55 to 41. Kind of doesn't really make a lot of sense, but you can kind of see it, kind of like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan voting the exact same. It kind of exists in that this doesn't make any sense, but I can see it in some random scenario. But Kamala is winning women by 20 points, which, again, is she going to win it by 20 points? No, she's not going to win women by 20 points. That she might win it by about 10 or 15, but she's not going to win women by 20 points. She's not going to do that. That would be like her pulling off a 2008 style victory, which that's definitely not going to happen. Considering how polarized the country is, I don't expect her to be this competitive with men, but also winning women by 20%. That doesn't make any sense. Now, another bad part of the polling, age. So, Kamala is winning 18 to 29, 56 to 41. That might make sense. I mean, definitely a lot more liberal, but kind of doesn't really make sense considering how young men are very Republican, and it's mostly the women that are liberal. So, how is Kamala winning young voters by even bigger margins than Joe Biden was winning them? Apparently, Kamala is just so much better than Joe Biden that she's completely upstepping him in every single part of his victory, which not exactly going to get a Joe Biden victory again. I can guarantee that. And then 30 to 44, somehow Kamala is also winning that, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of millennials, and I could see that happen. I could see Kamala winning 30 to 44, but now we got 45 to 64. This is like the hardcore Trump base. This is Republicans' bread and butter. And somehow Trump is only up 8 points with them. That doesn't make any fucking sense. That makes zero sense. How does Trump only win them by 8%? That doesn't make any sense at all. This is Republican territory. This is like pure Republican voters. How did how does 44% of those people go, "Hey, let's vote for Kamala?" That doesn't make any sense. Unless you're doing this in like what, deep blue New York City, that might be possible if they're doing the polling there, but really, it doesn't make any sense because you're talking about like Gen X, a lot of the younger boomers. Those are Republican voters. Those are not the millennials, the liberal millennials, some liberal Gen Z. Those voters are not in that category. This is the category full of like your standard Trump voter, a middle-aged working class guy. That's who occupies this camp. How are 44% of them going to Kamala? That doesn't, it boggles my mind to no end how somehow the Republican age group breadbasket somehow goes to Trump only by 8% when they went to Trump by like around 20 points in 2020. So please explain to me how that happened. And then 65 plus, Kamala is somehow winning them by 13 points, which, I mean, Joe Biden kind of won them by like a couple percent, maybe around 1% in 2020. Not exactly a great victory, but I mean, he still won them. How is Kamala somehow raising it by 12 points, even given the fact that a lot of boomers are entering that bracket and it's a lot of the liberal boomers that are entering that bracket? You still got a lot of the voters who voted for Trump both in 2020 and 2016 that are heavily Republican. Somehow they just flipped on a dime because Kamala's now the nominee, as Joe Biden has stepped out. I guess Joe Biden being an old man doesn't appeal to that group. Apparently, it's Kamala. She's just the big appeal to that group. Apparently, she's really popular with the people at the nursing home. But this isn't even the worst part. It somehow gets even worse than this. The age bracket makes absolutely no sense. The gender bracket, no sense. The state bracket, not really. Not really. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, race and ethnicity is what wanted me to make this video, because this might be actually the worst part. Kamala is only losing white voters by 1 point. Does that make any goddamn sense? No. Trump doesn't even crack 50%. How does that make sense? How? Well, I mean, the state polling, that kind of makes sense now, considering the race demographics in terms of the voters. You must be interviewing people on like Harvard campuses and interviewing people in like Vermont to get that. Trump won white voters by about 20 points, and he's likely going to win them by a similar margin. How is he lose? He's nearly losing to them. And even the worst Republicans in their campaign, they still won white voters. There's only a couple of them that lost white voters in Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania, and they won white voters still. But the very few cases that they lost by maybe a point. And those were in deep blue wave years in gubernatorial elections and stuff like that. So, how in the presidential election is Kamala somehow running it up with the white vote? How does she appeal to white voters over Joe Biden? How does Joe Biden somehow have less appeal to white voters than Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris literally has nothing to offer white voters. Joe Biden didn't have anything to offer them outside of the fact that he was white. That's at least something. Kamala Harris literally has absolutely nothing, yet she's getting 48% of the white vote. And the other demographics are actually pretty accurate. Trump is winning about 13% that of the black vote. That seems relatively accurate. Other voters, mainly Hispanics, Trump is winning about 45%, so that's a little bit more accurate. At least you got that right, but you had to heavily influence the white vote for her to win by this massive margin, which, I mean, if that's not proof of tampering at all, I don't know what is, because winning the white vote or winning 65 plus by the margin she is, that makes zero sense. It does make sense if they're manipulating the poll numbers to have Kamala win, but zero sense whatsoever. None of this makes any sense. Literally none of it. How does this happen? What scenario happens where Trump does better with black voters and Hispanic voters, but somehow is almost losing white voters and loses 65 plus and loses literally every age bracket outside of 45 to 64 where he's barely winning? Do they just poll at Starbucks? Is this where the polling is done? Do they poll at college campuses? Because if they do, I mean, the poll numbers make a lot of sense then. Apparently, she's winning college campuses by quite a bit. But that's not the general public. You gotta actually poll the general public to get actual real numbers. But they don't want real numbers. They want PR for Kamala. They don't want actual voters. They want Kamala voters. And they just want to put out the fake polls so that Kamala can get more funding and they can run heavy for Kamala. And it just makes absolutely no sense. How do people believe this crap? How do people believe these polls are actually legitimate? There are some people out there who actually look at this poll and look at the demographics and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense that Kamala is somehow almost winning the white vote and winning nursing home patients. I guess she just really appeals to them. She's so appealing to them, she somehow runs up the score by 20 points compared to Joe Biden, despite literally nothing happening to change that. What, did Tim Walz all of a sudden cause this? Well, this polling was before Tim Walz was even the nominee. So, what happened there? Is Kamala just that likable? Is Kamala just this magical figure that is going to deliver a massive electoral victory? We're not even talking about 2008 anymore. Because even then, John McCain did pretty well with white voters, so that can't be real. I guess this is like a 1964 victory, where somehow she's pulling an LBJ and just winning most of the states outside of the Deep South. But again, these are not polls. These are PR pieces for Kamala Harris and her campaign. They are not actual polling. This is not actual real information. This is simply just fake. It's fake news. It's entirely fake. It's manipulated polls in order to push a message. It's not there to actually inform the public on how the presidential race is going. It's there to encourage people to donate to Kamala Harris. And if you're going to fake polls, why not just go all in? Say that she's going to win by 1,000,000,000% and she's going to win every single vote known to man. She's going to get dead people to vote for her. She's going to get people who don't even live in the country to vote for her. The people of France are going to vote for her. Jesus is going to vote for her, apparently, because who knew that she's just this damn likable that she's winning tons of Trump voters, despite the fact that this very same poll says that a lot of Trump voters are still going with Trump. And it's only like 4 to 5% that will vote for Kamala Harris, which even then, that doesn't even really make any sense. But, anyways, the polling is shit. It's just shit. It's just complete and utter dog shit. So, New York Times, do better. Your polling is absolutely god awful. But yeah, if you disagree with the polling, if you disagree with me, leave them in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.